Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know you use this video to fall asleep. If you enjoy our stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what city are you watching? I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, let's dive in. The coffee in Millbrook, Pennsylvania tasted like disappointment served with a side of regret, which seemed fitting for a town that time had politely forgotten to invite to the 21st century. I sat in Mabel's Diner, the only establishment that stayed open past 8 p.m., nursing my third cup of what could generously be called coffee while reviewing the sparse notes I'd gathered for what my editor generously called a human interest piece. In reality, it was journalistic exile, punishment for the investigative article that had cost the paper their biggest advertiser and nearly resulted in a lawsuit. Underground tunnels, I muttered, flipping through the printouts of old forum posts and conspiracy theories I'd pulled from various paranormal websites. Probably just storm drains and wishful thinking. The assignment was supposedly simple. Investigate local rumors about a hidden bunker system beneath Millbrook. The kind of fluff piece that fills space between real news, designed to keep me busy and out of trouble while the editors decided whether to fire me outright or just let me fade away into irrelevance. But after 2 days of interviewing locals, I'd found something genuinely puzzling. Too many people mentioned the same specific details. The metal door in the woods east of town, the strange humming sounds that echoed through storm drains at night, the way certain areas of town had no cell reception despite being well within range of 3 different towers. The stories went back decades. Old-timers talked about construction crews in the 1950s who'd worked at night and sworn everyone to secrecy. Teenagers whispered about friends who'd gone exploring and come back changed, speaking in hushed tones about things they'd seen underground. Even the skeptics admitted there was something odd about the way sound carried in certain parts of town, how voices would echo strangely or seem to come from beneath your feet. Mabel herself, a woman whose family had run this diner for 3 generations, had grown tight-lipped when I'd asked about the tunnels. "Some things are better left buried, hun," she'd said, refilling my cup with hands that shook just enough to make me wonder what had made a woman who'd lived through decades of small-town drama suddenly nervous. This town's got its secrets, but they're secrets for a reason. That afternoon, armed with coordinates I'd pieced together from various contradictory accounts, I drove to the edge of town where the forest began. The woods outside Millbrook were typical Pennsylvania landscape, dense, dark, and unremarkable, the kind of place that looked the same in every direction and could swallow a person without effort. But after an hour of searching, following game trails and half-overgrown paths, I found it. The door was exactly as described, solid steel, painted military green but faded to a sickly olive color, set into what looked like a natural hillside. It was so overgrown with vegetation that I nearly walked past it twice, the vines and moss creating perfect camouflage. Only the geometric regularity of its edges gave it away as man-made. No markings identified its purpose, no warnings declared it off-limits, no windows offered hints at what lay beyond. Just a simple handle, worn smooth by countless hands, and a lock that had long since rusted away to nothing. When I pulled, the door opened easily, too easily, as if the hinges had been recently oiled despite the rust and decay that covered everything else. The contrast sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cool autumn air. The smell hit me first as I peered into the opening. Not the expected mustiness of an abandoned space, not the decay of organic matter, but something sharp and chemical, like ozone after a lightning strike mixed with the metallic tang of copper pennies. Beyond the threshold, concrete steps descended into absolute darkness. My phone's flashlight revealed only the first few steps before the beam seemed to weaken and dissolve into the black. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to leave, to mark this down as a dead end and write my article about urban legends and local folklore. But curiosity, the blessing and curse that had made me a journalist and nearly destroyed my career, pushed me forward into the dark. I should have brought better equipment. A real flashlight, extra batteries, maybe some rope, and a way to mark my path. Instead, I had only my phone's LED and the kind of overconfidence that comes from too many years of believing that the real world operates according to reasonable rules. The concrete steps were smooth, almost polished, and they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each footfall echoed strangely, the sound stretching and distorting as if the space itself was warping the audio waves. The walls were perfectly smooth concrete, curved into an arch overhead, with no visible seams or construction joints. It looked less like something built by human hands and more like it had been poured in a single, impossible operation. The temperature dropped as I descended, my breath beginning to mist in the beam of my flashlight. The chemical smell grew stronger, joined by something else, a low-frequency vibration that I felt more than heard, like standing too close to massive machinery. My phone showed no signal, not even the searching indicator. It was as if I'd stepped outside the coverage of every satellite and cell tower on Earth. After what my phone's pedometer claimed was a half a mile of steady descent, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. My flashlight beam couldn't find the far walls or ceiling, just faded into black void that seemed to swallow the light entirely. But I could sense the immensity of the space in the way my footsteps echoed and died, in the quality of the air and the way sound behaved. Along the walls I could reach, I discovered the first signs of purpose. Rows of metal panels, each about the size of a door, lined the chamber at regular intervals. They were sealed tight with no visible hinges or handles, no way to open them that I could determine. Some had small viewing windows made of thick, dark glass that revealed nothing when I pressed my face against them. Others bore symbols that might have been labels or warnings, but in no language I recognized. I tried to photograph everything, but my phone's camera produced only vague, blurry images that failed to capture what I was seeing with my own eyes. The darkness seemed to fight against documentation, as if it resented being observed and recorded. Even when I thought I'd captured clear images, they came out as meaningless smears of black and gray. The metal panels radiated a subtle warmth despite the cool air of the chamber. When I pressed my ear against one, I could hear something that might have been machinery, or might have been breathing. A slow, rhythmic sound that seemed to pulse in time with the vibrations I felt through the floor. At the far end of the chamber, I found another tunnel entrance. This one had a faded sign mounted above it, the letters barely visible in my phone's weak light. Level 2. Authorized personnel only. The words were in English, but something about the font looked wrong. Too angular, too precise, like it had been designed by someone who understood the language but didn't feel it the way a native speaker would. I photographed the sign, and for once, the image came out clear. But when I looked at it later, the words seemed to shift slightly, as if the letters were rearranging themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. Standing at the threshold of level 2, I felt the weight of the earth above me, the crushing mass of soil and stone that separated me from the surface world. The rational part of my brain cataloged all the reasons to turn back, No backup, no communications, no one who knew where I'd gone. But the journalist in me needed to know what lay deeper. What was worth building this elaborate underground facility beneath a forgotten town like Millbrook? I descended to Level 2. Level 2 was different in ways that made my skin crawl. The walls here were lined with a substance that looked like brushed metal, but felt warm and slightly yielding to the touch, as if there was something organic underneath the surface. The tunnel branched repeatedly, creating a maze of identical passages that curved and twisted in ways that hurt my head to follow. The geometry seemed wrong. Angles that should have been 90 degrees felt acute or obtuse, and several times I was certain I was walking in a straight line only to find myself back where I'd started. My phone's GPS had stopped working entirely, not even attempting to acquire a signal. The compass app spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. According to the accelerometer, I was sometimes walking uphill when the floor felt level, sometimes level when I was clearly descending. The technology I'd relied on to navigate the surface world was useless here. The viewing panels down here were larger than those on Level 1, and some were lit from within by a dim, phosphorescent glow that reminded me uncomfortably of bioluminescence. When I looked through them, I saw chambers filled with what I initially took for machinery. Complex assemblages of tubes and geometric forms that pulsed slowly with internal light. But the shapes were too organic, too flowing to be man-made technology. They looked more like organs, like the internal workings of some vast organism, and sometimes I thought I could see veins or arteries running through them, carrying fluids that glowed with their own light. In one chamber, I witnessed movement for the first time. Something pale and segmented crawled across what might have been a control panel, leaving a trail of luminescent fluid in its wake. It was roughly the size of a large dog, but it moved in a way that violated my understanding of how living things should behave, as if gravity affected it differently, as if it existed partially in dimensions I couldn't perceive. When it turned toward the window, I saw that it had too many eyes, dozens of them, arranged in spiraling patterns across what served as its head. They were compound eyes like an insect's, but they tracked independently, some focusing on me while others scanned the chamber around it. The thing regarded me with an intelligence that was clearly alien but undeniably present. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs, and knocked into the opposite wall. The impact produced a sound like ringing metal that echoed through the corridors, and suddenly, every viewing panel in the immediate area blazed with light. The creatures, and there were dozens of them now, in chambers I hadn't even noticed, all turned toward their respective windows simultaneously. They pressed against the glass with appendages that weren't quite tentacles and weren't quite arms, leaving smears of that luminescent fluid across the surfaces. I ran. The corridors twisted around me as I fled. Passages that had been straight when I'd walked down them now curved impossibly back on themselves. My flashlight beam wavered and dimmed, as if the very air was becoming thicker, more resistant to light. Behind me, I could hear sounds, not quite scratching, not quite knocking, but something that suggested the creatures had found a way out of their chambers and were following me through the maze of tunnels. When I finally stopped running, gasping and shaking in a circular room I didn't remember entering, I was completely lost. 7 passages led out of the chamber, each identical to the others. I had no idea which one I'd come from, no way to orient myself in the twisted geometry of Level 2. That's when I noticed the floor. It wasn't concrete like the upper levels, wasn't even the warm metal substance that lined the walls. It was made of something that looked almost like stone, but stone that had been carved with impossible precision into intricate patterns. Symbols covered every surface, carved deep and filled with the same phosphorescent material that lit the viewing panels. The symbols were definitely not English, not any human language I'd ever encountered. They seemed to writhe and shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new configurations. At the center of the circular room was a raised platform with what looked like a podium or control station. Its surface was covered with more symbols, arranged in concentric circles around a central depression that looked like it might accommodate a human hand. As I approached, the symbols began to glow more brightly, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Without thinking, driven by a combination of curiosity and desperation, I reached out and pressed my palm into the central depression. The moment my skin made contact with the surface, the world exploded with sensation. Images flooded my mind. Not my own memories, but something else's recollections from perspectives that human consciousness wasn't designed to contain. I saw Millbrook as it had been centuries ago, before European settlers, before Native Americans. I saw it when the land was empty and raw, when something else walked this earth under alien stars. They came from below, from spaces between spaces, from angles that human geometry couldn't describe. They were vast and ancient and patient beyond human comprehension, entities that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The bunker wasn't built by humans at all. It was built by them as a way station, a rest stop on journeys between realities that spanned eons. The facility extended far beyond what I'd seen. Networks of tunnels and chambers that stretched for hundreds of miles beneath Pennsylvania, connecting to similar installations across the continent, across the world. It was part of a vast machine, a regulatory system that maintained the stability of reality itself. Earth sat at a critical junction point between dimensions, and without constant maintenance, the barriers between worlds would begin to break down. I saw the truth about the creatures I'd encountered. They weren't prisoners or experiments or invaders. They were maintenance staff, groundskeepers tending to equipment that humans couldn't even perceive properly, much less operate. They existed partially outside normal space-time, able to work with technologies that operated on principles beyond human physics. And I, stumbling through their facility like a child in a particle accelerator, had triggered systems that had been dormant for decades. My presence had activated security protocols, awakened sleeping machinery, sent alerts through networks that spanned dimensions, but the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. I saw the town above, its residents going about their daily lives, unaware that beneath their feet lay technology that predated human civilization by millions of years. I understood now why some areas had no cell reception, why certain residents seemed oddly disconnected from the modern world, why Mabel's hands had shaken when she'd warned me away from the truth. The town wasn't built over the bunker system. The town was part of the bunker system, a camouflage layer designed to hide the entrance from casual discovery. And the residents, some of them anyway, weren't entirely human anymore. They were hybrids, humans who had been gradually modified over generations to serve as interfaces between the alien technology and the surface world. They could walk among normal humans without detection, but they could also survive in the deeper levels of the facility, could communicate with the maintenance creatures, could understand and operate systems that would drive unmodified humans insane. The visions faded, leaving me gasping on the floor of the circular room. my mind reeling from contact with intelligences so vast that touching their thoughts was like trying to drink from a fire hose. The symbols on the platform had gone dark again, but I could feel them watching me, evaluating me, deciding what to do with the contamination I represented in their sterile system. I heard them coming before I saw them, the maintenance creatures flowing through the passages with liquid grace that belonged to no terrestrial evolution. But they weren't alone. Walking among them, moving with the same fluid motion, were people I recognized from town. Mabel from the diner, her gray hair now showing streaks of silver that seemed to move independently. The gas station attendant who'd been so helpful when I'd stopped for directions, his eyes now reflecting light like an animal's. The librarian who'd assisted me with historical records, her movements too precise, too calculated to be entirely human. "You shouldn't have come down here," Mabel said, her voice carrying harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "We tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen." Her face was still recognizably human, but there were subtle changes. Skin that seemed too smooth, features that were slightly too symmetrical, an intelligence behind her eyes that was both more and less than human consciousness. They surrounded me in the circular room, the changed townspeople and their inhuman companions. I expected violence, expected to be torn apart by creatures from dimensions I couldn't perceive. Instead, they waited with the patience of stone, of deep places in the earth that had measured time in geological epochs. "You've seen too much," the librarian said. Her name was Sarah, I remembered. Sarah Chen, who'd moved to Millbrook 20 years ago to care for her elderly mother and never left. "The knowledge is in you now. It can't be removed without destroying your mind entirely." "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the vast chamber. "We're what we chose to become," Mabel replied, settling gracefully onto one of the stone benches that ringed the room. "What we needed to become, to serve as custodians. They don't force the change, they offer it. A partnership, a chance to be part of something vast and eternal, something that preserves the stability of reality itself." I understood then, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with horrible clarity. The bunker system didn't just extend beneath Millbrook, it was part of a global network, nodes in a vast machine that regulated the intersection points between dimensions. The entities that had built it weren't invaders or conquerors. They were engineers, maintenance specialists working on a project that had been in motion since before Earth had cooled from its primordial formation. "The barriers are weakening," Sarah explained, her two bright eyes fixed on mine. "They have been for decades. Climate change, nuclear weapons, quantum experiments. Humanity keeps pushing against the boundaries of reality without understanding what they're doing. We're the ones who keep the walls intact, who prevent things from bleeding through from dimensions where matter doesn't behave the way it does here." She gestured to the symbols on the floor, which were beginning to glow again in response to our conversation. "This facility is one of thousands around the world. Most are in places like Millbrook, small towns that exist in the margins of human attention, forgotten corners where the work can continue undisturbed. Each one requires human custodians, people who can interface between the technology and the surface world. The choice is yours," Mabel said, rising to her feet with movements that flowed like water. "Accept the change, become what we are, and help us maintain the balance that keeps your reality stable. Join something that will outlast nations and species, that will continue long after the sun has burned out and humanity has evolved into something unrecognizable." She paused, and I could see the answer to my unspoken question in her altered features. "Or?" I asked anyway. "There is no or," Sarah said gently. "You've been exposed to too much. Your mind has been in direct contact with the network. You can't return to your old life, can't pretend you never saw what you've seen. The knowledge would drive you insane within days, and insanity would make you a security risk we can't tolerate." I thought of my editor, waiting for my article about underground tunnels and local folklore. I thought of my ex-wife, who'd left because I could never let sleeping dogs lie, never stopped digging when prudence dictated I should walk away. I thought of everyone who'd ever told me that my curiosity would be the death of me. They were right, in a way. My human self was already dying. I could feel it happening as the alien knowledge settled into my brain like sediment in still water, changing the fundamental structure of my thoughts. But something else was being born. Something that could perceive dimensions humans couldn't see, that could understand purposes spanning geological time. The maintenance creatures pressed closer, and I saw that what I'd taken for hostility was actually anticipation. They were welcoming me, preparing to teach me mysteries they'd guarded for millions of years. I looked around the circle of faces, some human, some not, all watching me with patient interest. Then I reached out and placed my hand on the control platform again, this time accepting the connection instead of recoiling from it. The transformation didn't hurt, which surprised me. I'd expected agony, a burning metamorphosis like something from a body horror film. Instead, it felt like coming into focus, like adjusting the lens on a camera until everything became sharp and clear for the first time. My vision expanded first, new spectra opening up that revealed the true nature of the facility around me. I could see the energy flowing through the walls, the complex patterns of force that regulated dimensional stability. I could perceive the entire network now, not just the chamber I stood in, miles of tunnels and chambers, vast machines that regulated forces I was only beginning to understand. I could see other facilities too, nodes in the global network, stretching across continents like neurons in an impossibly vast brain. My body followed, adapting to new requirements with changes that were subtle but profound. Additional joints appeared in my limbs, allowing me to move through spaces designed for different geometries. My skeleton became lighter but stronger, my muscles more efficient. My eyes developed new sensitivities that let me perceive spectrums of light that revealed the true nature of the technology around me. Most importantly, my brain expanded its capacity, creating new neural pathways to handle concepts that human language had no words for. I could feel my old thought patterns being preserved like files in an archive, while new modes of consciousness came online. I was still recognizably myself, but myself expanded beyond the limitations of purely human perception. The knowledge came gradually, uploaded in careful stages to prevent the kind of madness that instant revelation would bring. I learned that the network had been operational for millions of years, predating not just human civilization, but complex life on Earth. The entities that built it, I could never quite perceive them directly, only through the interfaces they'd left behind, were engineers working on a project that spanned multiple realities. Earth was one component in a vast machine, a processing station in an assembly line that stretched across dimensions. The planet's position at the intersection of several dimensional planes made it critically important for maintaining stability across the entire system. The network regulated Earth's position in ways that human science couldn't detect, ensuring that certain cosmic alignments remained stable, that the barriers between realities didn't degrade beyond acceptable parameters. Without the network, without constant maintenance and adjustment, reality itself would begin to unravel. The fundamental forces that held matter together would start to fluctuate. The laws of physics would become suggestions rather than absolutes. Entire regions of space-time would slide sideways into dimensions that couldn't support conscious life. The townspeople, my new colleagues, had been recruited over decades as the original human caretakers aged beyond their ability to interface with the alien technology. Each had been chosen for specific skills the network needed. Mabel's intuitive understanding of people and their motivations, Sarah's research abilities and talent for archival work, others with backgrounds in engineering, medicine, communications. I was here because of my investigative skills, my ability to dig up hidden connections and make sense of complex systems. There were others like us in similar towns across the world, sleepy places that tourists drove through without stopping, that seemed to exist in the margins of modern life, forgotten by progress and time. All of them hiding entrance points to the network, all of them staffed by humans who had chosen to become something more than human in service of preserving everything humanity valued. When I finally emerged from the bunker system, 3 days had passed according to my phone, though it felt like weeks had gone by in the depths. My editor had left a dozen increasingly frantic voicemails, but they seemed like communications from another species now. The concerns of human journalism, deadlines and word counts and fact-checking, felt small and distant compared to the work I now understood I was part of. Millbrook looked completely different through my enhanced perception. I could see the subtle signs that had been invisible to my human eyes, the way certain buildings were positioned to channel forces from below, the geometric patterns in the street layout that helped regulate dimensional stability, the residents who moved with the telltale fluid grace of the changed walking among those who remained purely human. The town wasn't just camouflage. It was an integral part of the system, an interface between the network and the surface world. Every aspect of its design served multiple purposes, from the completely mundane to the cosmically significant. Mabel smiled at me when I entered the diner, and to anyone else it would have looked like a normal small-town greeting for a regular customer. But I could see the additional layers of meaning now, the recognition of shared purpose, the welcome into an ancient community, the subtle acknowledgement of my successful transformation. "How was your investigation, hon?" she asked, pouring me coffee without being asked. The liquid was still bitter, but now I could taste the trace minerals that had been carefully selected to optimize neural function, the subtle additives that made the transition easier for new recruits. "Illuminating," I replied, and she laughed at the private joke. I spent the next hour writing my article, the one my editor expected, a lightweight piece about urban legends and local folklore, dismissed with just enough journalistic skepticism to ensure no one would take it seriously. I described finding nothing but old storm drains and animal burrows, suggested that the tunnel stories were probably connected to moonshine operations during Prohibition, when creative entrepreneurs had needed discrete locations for their enterprises. It was perfect misdirection, the kind of debunking article that would actually reinforce people's tendency to dismiss the truth as fantasy. Readers would chuckle at small-town superstitions. My editor would be satisfied with my apparent return to safe topics, and the network would remain hidden. The few conspiracy theorists who might be inspired to investigate would find only locked doors and empty tunnels. The access points that had allowed me in had already been relocated. but I knew I wouldn't be staying in journalism much longer. There was too much real work to do now, too many systems to maintain and monitor. I'd already started sensing disturbances in other parts of the network, problems that would require investigation and perhaps intervention. I was part of something vast and eternal now, a caretaker of realities that most people couldn't even imagine existed. It was a heavy responsibility, but also a profound privilege. Few humans ever got to see behind the curtain of existence, to understand their world's true place in the cosmic order. The work began immediately. Within a week of my transformation, I was traveling to other nodes in the network, learning the intricacies of dimensional maintenance from custodians who had been doing this work for decades. Each facility was different, adapted to local conditions and requirements, but the underlying principles were consistent across the globe. In Montana, I worked with a former geologist who monitored seismic sensors that detected not earthquakes, but fluctuations in the dimensional substrate. Her facility was built into an extinct volcano, its chambers carved from obsidian that naturally channeled the energies they needed to regulate. In New Mexico, I met an astronomer who had discovered the network when he'd detected radio signals from supposedly empty space. His installation was disguised as a radio telescope, but it actually communicated with maintenance stations throughout the solar system, coordinating adjustments that kept Earth's dimensional position stable. In Maine, I learned about oceanic regulatory stations from a marine biologist who had found things in deep ocean trenches that shouldn't exist according to human science. Her facility extended into the abyssal depths, where pressure and darkness created natural barriers that kept the most sensitive equipment hidden from surface observation. Each custodian had a story similar to mine, a moment of discovery, a choice between ignorance and transformation, an acceptance of responsibilities that spanned geological timescales. None of them regretted their decision. How could they, when they could see what we were all working to preserve? The network was patient, but it was also thorough. Every year, more small towns like Millbrook appeared on the map, unremarkable places that existed in the margins of human attention. Every year, more investigators and truth seekers found doors they weren't meant to find, saw things they weren't meant to see. Most made the right choice, accepting transformation and joining our community. But sometimes someone stumbled onto the truth and couldn't adapt to the knowledge, couldn't accept what they'd discovered. Those people simply disappeared from the surface world. Their families remembered them as having moved away suddenly, taken a job in another state, gone traveling, and never come back. The network was compassionate but practical. It didn't allow loose ends that could compromise the greater work. I helped with 3 recruitments myself during my first year, identifying individuals with the right combination of curiosity and capability. A climate scientist in Colorado who had noticed impossible weather patterns. A physicist in Switzerland who had detected particles that shouldn't exist. A programmer in Silicon Valley who had discovered code running in systems that had no visible source. Each one made the same choice I had, trading their limited human perspective for something infinitely larger. The process was becoming more common as humanity pushed harder against the boundaries of reality with their technology and experiments. The network needed more custodians to handle the increasing instability, more human interfaces to manage the growing complexity of maintaining dimensional barriers. I've been working with the network for 18 months now. To the outside world, I'm just another journalist who burned out and moved to a small town to find myself. I write freelance articles about safe topics, restaurant reviews, local history, seasonal festivals. Nothing that would attract attention or bring investigators to the various nodes I help monitor. My enhanced perception continues to develop. New capabilities coming online as my neural modifications mature. I can sense dimensional fluctuations across vast distances now, feel the pulse of the network like a heartbeat that encompasses the planet. I understand concepts that have no names in human languages, perceive realities that exist in the spaces between conventional dimensions. The work is accelerating. Every month brings new crises, new instabilities that require intervention. Humanity's technology is advancing faster than their wisdom, pushing against barriers they don't know exist, threatening to tear holes in reality that would be catastrophic beyond imagination. We do what we can. We regulate what can be regulated, repair what can be repaired, and when necessary, we intervene more directly. Scientists who get too close to dangerous discoveries find their funding cut, their equipment mysteriously failing, their research taking new directions that lead away from cosmic truth. It's for their own good as much as the world's. Some knowledge is simply too dangerous for minds that haven't been prepared to contain it. The network is growing, its influence spreading as more humans accept transformation and join our ranks. We're not replacing humanity. We're preserving it, ensuring that it can continue to exist in a stable reality while the greater work continues around them, invisible and unacknowledged. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd never found that door in the woods, never descended into the depths beneath Millbrook. But the wondering never lasts long. I can see too much now, understand too much about the fragility of existence and the vast forces that keep reality stable. Ignorance might have been bliss, but it would also have been a lie. The truth is that everything humans think they know about the universe is a simplified approximation, a children's version of reality that omits the most important details. The real universe is stranger and more wonderful and more terrifying than any human mind could comprehend without modification. It's full of intelligences so vast and alien that their casual thoughts could reshape entire galaxies. Technologies so advanced that they operate on principles that transcend the physical laws humans think are absolute. And at the center of it all is the network, maintaining the delicate balance that allows conscious life to exist, preserving pockets of stability in an ocean of chaos. We are its servants and its guardians, human enough to understand what needs protecting, transformed enough to do the protecting. The coffee in Millbrook still tastes bitter, but I understand now that some things are meant to be bitter. They remind us of what we've left behind, what we've sacrificed to serve something larger than ourselves. Every cup is a small communion, a reminder of the choice we made and the responsibilities we've accepted. And in the depths beneath the town, beneath 1,000 other towns across the globe, the great work continues. Miles of tunnels and chambers, stretching farther than any human explorer will ever discover, tended by creatures of light and mathematics and purpose beyond imagination. The network endures, the network grows, and reality, fragile and precious as spun glass, remains stable for another day. In my desk drawer, I keep a copy of the article I never published, the real account of what I found beneath Millbrook. Sometimes I read it and remember what it felt like to be purely human, to live in a universe that seems small and comprehensible. But I never regret my choice. How could I, when I know what hangs in the balance? The deep truth is that we are all custodians, whether we know it or not. Every conscious being that exists does so because vast intelligences have chosen to maintain the conditions that allow consciousness to flourish. The least we can do is accept that responsibility when it's offered to us. The work is never finished. There is always more to learn, more to protect, more to preserve. And somewhere in the dark spaces between dimensions, entities older than galaxies continue their patient labor, maintaining the cosmic machinery that keeps existence itself from falling apart. We are their partners now, their representatives in a reality they can barely perceive directly. It's the greatest honor any species could hope for, even if we can never speak of it to those who remain behind in the smaller world of human concerns. The network is eternal. The work continues, and the truth, vast and terrible and beautiful, waits patiently in the depths for the next curious mind brave enough to seek it out.